Hey everyone, and welcome to Blueberry Glen. My name is Dave, and along with my wife, we own this beautiful farm just outside of Duvall, Washington, here in western Washington. We're right at the base of the foothills to the Cascade Mountains and just outside of the Snoqualmie River Valley, about 6 miles east of Duvall. So please join me on a walk around our farm this afternoon. Let's take a peek at these beautiful blueberry plants, the changing color on the farm. I'll tell you a little bit about our farm and what we have planned for the future of this place. So my wife and I purchased this farm in fall of 2021. We just wrapped up our second season of farming, and we operate primarily as a U-pick blueberry farm. We'll start our walk in what we call the front field here. The front field has a little over a half acre of blueberries, and it's set up in a grid system. And that means that we have an equal distance between all of the plants on this grid here. It's about 8 feet from center of the bush to center of the bush. And the different varieties of blueberries are all in these long rows as we walk here on the farm. And we'll walk down the field from south to north. On the south end of the field we have a small pond. On the north end of the field is a public entrance to the farm, which we're headed towards now. As you see some of the leaves that are falling right now. We're waiting on a big windstorm here to knock the rest off here in the next couple days. We have 11 different varieties of heirloom blueberries here on the farm. Up in this front field we have 10 different varieties, with each of these long rows being a different variety. In the back field, which we'll walk to in just a bit, we have 7 different varieties of blueberry plants. Now, as we walk, you'll see obviously a lot of leaves on the ground, and at the base of each of these plants, you'll notice it sort of rises up above the grass that surrounds it. Each of these plants has a mulch layer of essentially a wood byproduct that helps provide some nutrients for the bush. It also helps encapsulate a disease called mummyberry, which it's a fungus that some of these plants can get, the blueberries can get. And so in the front field at least, you'll notice that these are pretty well mulched and have these wood chips on them. We're continuing, at least for this year, the last 2 years, we've continued a practice of using wood chips, similar to like animal bedding that you would get from a supplier. We had it delivered in a 30-yard truck. The previous owners had used that as their mulch, and so we were trying that. As we walk through, you'll notice there's some puddles. So our farm, especially in these fields with the blueberries, is really pretty darn wet this time of year. We just had a massive rainstorm, probably our second big rainstorm of the season. We actually got some flooding in our backfield, which you'll be able to see in a little bit. Here in our front field and sort of the center of the field, we get some rain accumulation. We do have a couple ditches that help drain this field. We need to probably clean those out this season. But the soil here is really peaty, so it holds a lot of that moisture, and as you can see, a lot of it sits on top. So we're working on some solutions to help the water at least not accumulate on the surface. Blueberries really like a lot of water, but they don't like wet feet, so they want to be able to drain. Another reason that we have the mulch is to get some of their roots out of the soil, or a little bit above the otherwise wet soil. So something that we're continuing to work on is how to drain these fields and make sure that the water is absorbing correctly into the fields. So as we walk through, you'll notice there's a ton of grass in our alleyways between the bushes. We use that primarily to be able to walk on, to get our equipment across, but it also helps lock in a lot of moisture for these blueberries, especially in the summer. Make sure that there's not too much evaporation. As we walk towards the entrance to the farm here, the farm entrance, you'll notice, man, these blueberry leaves are awfully beautiful, especially against that green of that grass. So up ahead is our vegetable garden, which is an absolute mess. We've had a frost, so it's killed off most of our vegetables that we grew this year. We still got a few things like carrots that are still hanging out in there, but it's a mess, so we're not going to show you that. As we walk down each of these long rows that we're looking down, each of these rows is a different variety, as I mentioned earlier. I'll tell you what, let's wander back to our backfield. As we wander, you'll see a couple things. Maybe we'll show you later. So we've obviously got our blueberry glen cut out there, a spot for photos that people take, and boy, do we have a lot of folks that choose to take photos. Over to the right was our blueberry shed, sort of a mess, so we're not going to show you that right now. And then as we walk down this path, this is the backfield. When we purchased the farm, this was all pretty overgrown in grass, and we decided to cut it and thought it looked pretty nice, and was able to add the seating area that you see over to the right. And eventually we want to add some more production here of different kinds of vegetables or fruit, maybe an orchard, something like that, and possibly some land for some animals at some point. So as we move into the backfield here, you'll notice that the previous owner had it sort of roped off, fenced off with some hot wire, an electric fence to keep out deer and maybe some bear. We have not been using that hot wire, and it's one of my projects to take that down. Well, let me introduce you to one of our varieties. This is actually our earliest producing variety of blueberry bush. This is the Weymouth variety. And this bush is a little overgrown. We'll talk a little bit about pruning here in a minute. But the colors on these bushes are just incredible here in early November, early to mid-November. We get this amazing red and orange, which is just one of the benefits of being here on the farm, as your front yard turns into nothing but these colors. It's pretty impressive. Okay, so this backfield is about an acre of blueberry production. There's a little bit of open space back here, so the field itself is bigger than an acre, but let's call it an acre of production. Combined between the front field and the back field, we have about 850 blueberry bushes, probably closer to 850. And there was over 1,000 blueberry bushes planted here back in the 30s or 40s when the farm was originally planted. There's been a fair amount of die-off over the years, and we'll see that as we walk through the field. It was wet in the front field, it's wet in this back field. Like I said, we had a ton of rain, and so it's just filling in some of these low spots, and you'll get to see, I bet this back corner of this field is flooded pretty well. So we'll get to show you that here in a minute. So one of the things that we're hoping to do with this farm is fill in all those bushes that died off over the years. And we can do that by taking cuttings of the existing heirloom varieties of blueberries, and from those cuttings we can get them to root and add them back into the field. And so we're going to fill in some of those holes that exist in between the bushes, and we're going to hopefully be growing quite a few more blueberry bushes here at some point soon. Gosh, I mentioned those weeds that we got a little lazy on this season, and we have some work to do this fall to get this cleaned up. Let's talk a little bit about how we care for these bushes, and maybe talk a little bit about pruning. I think this bush here will be a good one to talk about. So blueberries grow best on wood that's about 3 to 8 years old. So one of the things that you want to do for your blueberries is pretty consistently prune them. The older wood on this bush is going to be that brown, sort of scaly wood that you see there. The younger wood is going to be red in color, and you can get a good sense of how old things are by looking at the diameter of the branches that are coming off. When you prune, you get a bunch of robust growth from the base of the plant. These little shoots are coming up really strong after a pretty hard pruning last year, and so we'll go through and thin a lot of these out. We should probably walk you through how we prune these someday if folks are interested, but it involves cutting out some of these larger canes, then going through, cutting out, trimming out some of the smaller branches that may be dead or damaged or in the wrong place, and all of that helps promote healthy, robust growth of the plant so that we have as many blueberries as possible and the energy being put into the blueberries. Now, because we've opened up the crown, we've provided some more room at the base for blueberries to grow. You see a lot of the young growth coming out of the base of the blueberry bush. Now, with some of the leaves already off this bush, you can actually see some of these red branches have some of the buds for next year already showing, and maybe another day we can walk through and we can show you what the different the buds are, the leaf buds, the fruit buds. If folks are interested, we'd love to show you. As we walk around, you'll notice that some of these plants were not pruned as hard as that one that we were just looking at. You'll see around the bases, especially in this back field, a lot of moss growing around some of our older canes. Some of these canes are massive. We've cut out canes that are 2.5, 3 inches across, which means they're tens of years old, maybe 15, 20 years old, which is not great for the health of the plant. In our reading about blueberries, we're learning, of course, that the blueberries, again, like to grow on wood that's between 3 and 8 years old, and the older the wood, the more likely it is to harbor disease, but also just decreases production. I'm showing you the moss here. It doesn't really hurt the bushes. I suppose it traps some of that moisture against that wood, which could encourage some disease growth, but like I said, we're working on getting a lot of that cut out. We purchased this farm, almost all of these bushes were overgrown like that, and you're seeing some of that back here. The challenge is, of course, we need the production from the bushes to continue while we're doing the pruning. So some folks would tell you to come in and just chop all this to the ground, cut out all this wood, leave almost nothing, and the bush will regenerate. It will come back. Blueberries are pretty hardy. They can do that if you do that correctly. We, though, needed to be able to harvest. We needed a place for folks to come in our first 2 years of business so we can figure out our business model. We can make a little bit of money back on what we were spending. And so that just wasn't a possibility for us. We have been pruning. We're on maybe a 3 to 5 year plan to get these bushes back into health and producing properly. And the truth is they're getting there. These bushes are producing better this year than they did the previous year for us, and that's a lot based on our pruning. We'll continue to work on that over the next couple of years to get these bushes the right size to where they're producing properly and they're nice and healthy. This is a nice view back over the field. Gosh, again, these colors this time of year are just incredible. The reds and oranges and yellows that these blueberries produce is just beautiful. And you're not going to believe me that it was pouring rain just the other day when we've got this beautiful blue sky today. The sun's out. Against these green trees doesn't get much better than this. This view, sort of as we pan across, gives you a sense of the scale of the backfield, and really that you're back here in the woods, surrounded by everything. But we just saw that blue sky. Now we're looking at the water that's collected here in this back corner of the field. Seasonally, and for a couple days, depending on how much rain we get, we'll get this back corner of the field to be covered in a couple inches of water, sometimes up to maybe 6, 8, 10 inches of water, depending on how hard it's rained. We understand that this wasn't always like this, that this is a new occurrence for the farm here in the last decade and a half. There were some changes made to how the water flowed off of a neighbor's property and sort of accumulates here. Good news is that generally it drains within a few days, and it's part of the reason that you probably have some die-off in this back corner of the field, is that the blueberries were submerged for quite some time, several times a year, and so they have those wet feet. It's not good for them. They don't like that. They might have gotten some disease and eventually died off. So we'll probably not. This is the area that the water flows back to. I think there's a small pond or stream or some sort of area back there where the water's gathering and then overflows here when we get these big rain events. So maybe someday we'll get the water issue figured out and be able to replant this corner. If not, no big deal. We can just leave it as is and make it a grass area, and we'll replant around it. As we continue our walk, let me tell you a little bit about the history of the farm. So we purchased this farm in 2021, but the farm has a long history. The blueberries were planted in the 1930s or 40s, so these plants are just under 90 years old. When we were learning about blueberries when we first purchased the farm, we learned that most varieties live between 40 and 60 years. So these are some ancient plants. We're the 6 owners of the farm, and so we're proud to be sort of carrying on this stewardship of this land and care for this land, and we really hope to improve it and make it really productive for both us and for the community. People love coming here to pick blueberries and sort of be in nature. The folks we purchased the farm from, their father looked into the history of the farm and the previous owners. They shared the story with us, so what I'm telling you now is from what they learned. We've also heard some stories from folks who visited the farm over the years and chatted with us while they were picking their blueberries. And those folks some of them have been picking here for decades, and so they've known several of the owners here over the years. So we understand the original owners of this property were John and Mabel Close. They purchased this farm as undeveloped land back in 1936. At the time, it was about 40 acres of land, so it included some of the parcels around us, because currently we are about 11 acres, a little over 11 acres of property. They built a house in 1937, which is still standing today, though it isn't on our parcel of land. Sometime in the late 30s or early to mid 40s, John cleared the land and planted the 2 fields of blueberry bushes that still exist today. I'm sure his wife and daughters helped a lot. It was undoubtedly a family endeavor. In 1955, someone, probably the closest, put up an ad in the Carnival Reporter newspaper, which was the local newspaper at the time. And the ad read, "For sale, blueberries 6 miles east of Duval on Kelly Road, phone Duval 874, unquote. And I love that they had a 3-digit phone number back then for the town. So you'd call Duval, and then you'd ask to be patched through to 874. How neat is that? The farm had a couple more owners after that, including John and Maxine Close's daughter, and then the Riddell family. And then in 1968, a local teacher, coach, and counselor purchased the farm, a gentleman named Larry Leyden. We hear lots of stories about Mr. Leyden from neighbors, from folks who came to pick at the farm. My aunt, who moved to a nearby town when she was in high school, remembers having him as a teacher. He was a little bit of a local legend, and what I understand, a really caring person and nice person. And then in 2000, the owners that we bought the farm from, the Johnsons, purchased the farm, and over time they added a U-pick sunflower garden and tended to these berries for quite a few years. And then we purchased the farm 2 years ago in 2021 after a long search for a property that we could produce food on. So perhaps maybe someday we'll share the story of how we ended up getting hooked on the idea of purchasing a farm, because I think it's pretty entertaining. You know, I just can't get over all these colors, especially the green moss there and the old wood, and then these yellow leaves. It's just beautiful at this place, and it's one of the benefits of being here and carrying on this tradition of blueberry farming is the incredible views and beauty that we get to be surrounded by. So folks might be interested in our business model. As I mentioned, we primarily operate as a U-pick blueberry farm. On days we're open, guests can come in and pick in the fields, collecting anywhere from a quarter pound of blueberries and buckets we provide to some of our customers this year pick 20 pounds or more. And folks pay by the pound for blueberries, so we have a flat rate that we charge. They come and weigh up and then they pay us. We don't have an entrance fee for pickers, which is something that some farms do, and we may consider in the future, but we're just not there yet. My wife has a small cut flower garden where she makes bouquets that are sold on days we're open. I'm biased, but she has a really great eye for arranging flowers and makes pretty lovely bouquets. We've had our first couple frosts here already, so her flowers are done for the season, but we'll look forward to showing you that in the future. We also have a small garden, and it's something we hope to expand in the future to do some vegetables, and so that folks can purchase them after they pick their berries. One of my favorite things that we do is a date night. So this season on Saturday evenings, we invited people into the farm. They would buy a ticket for two to come to date night. We would limit it to 12 couples, so it was a pretty small gathering. And we'd start the date night. And I'm going to pause here and just tell you, we're in the middle of cleaning up this farm. All this has been overgrown, and so we did some cutting a couple weeks ago, try and cut down some of the brush that's sort of overgrown in various areas of the farm. We came across these rounds. My brother-in-law and my sister's boyfriend were all helping, and so we've got a lot of wood here to get cleaned up and taken care of. Just a quick look around this back field. This is all area that we hope to expand into at some point with some sort of production, but we need to get some of this brush cut to see what's back there. There's another down tree. There's just a lot of cleanup that we have to do, and it just takes a lot of time. While we have a tractor, we don't have a brush hog for the tractor, so just the work's a little slow. Alright, so this date night that we would do, folks would come, they'd buy a ticket, they'd get to sit here in the back field and really just enjoy time together. What they'd do is they'd arrive about 6 p.m., so right as the sun was dipping below the trees here. They would lay a blanket or sit out in the chairs or tables that we have provided around the farm, and they would get from us a charcuterie box that we'd put together that featured nibbles from our garden or some other local businesses that produce food. They were welcome to explore the farm, pick some blueberries, or just enjoy the quiet. We got some great marketing support at the end of the second half of the season here, and we sold out the remaining date nights in August, which was really a nice surprise for us. People loved it. And my wife and I had a blast too doing these. We would greet folks as they arrived, get them squared away with their nibbles and the supplies that they would need for the night, and orient them a little bit to the farm, and then turn them loose. And they had 2 hours to enjoy. We would stay available for folks if they needed anything, but really it was just a chance for us to sit and have a drink with ourselves unless they needed something. And folks loved date night. We had a ton of folks from the local community come out, but also a lot of folks from Seattle, and they told us they enjoyed the opportunity to be outside in some quiet place and enjoying some nature and a bit of a slower pace of life. And the fire pit here was certainly a highlight for a lot of them. We had one couple that came out and didn't really do anything. They didn't pick any berries. They just laid for the entire 2 hours on a blanket in our back field, just relaxing and enjoying the quiet and some of the things in our garden. They came back twice more this season, so they really found it enjoyable, a little break from their children, just to be in nature and being quiet. And of course, during the season, all of these red blueberries are nice. This beautiful green, surrounded by these green trees, some of which will have leaves on them, but these incredible evergreens. Just to wrap up the business model, we do a bit of purchasing, a bit of wholesale berry sales too. We have a local jam maker who purchases blueberries from us, which they turn into an incredible jam. The company is McCormick Jam Company. So please go check them out and support another small local business. As I was panning around, you notice that we are surrounded by trees back here. We're up here in the woods about 6 miles toward the Cascade foothills from the town of Duval. Duval is a small farming town, and it has its own great history, and we can talk about that someday. Most of the agricultural production around here is done in the Snoqualmie River Valley, and there are more than 200 farm businesses in the valley. Outside of the valley, up here by where we are, there are a ton of folks doing homesteading, as well as some smaller farms. On the drive from Duval, you'll drive past cows, goats, chickens, horses, pigs. A few folks are farming some hay. So there's some hay fields and lots of gardens. So we're surrounded by folks that are producing their own food and food for others. One of the great things about being up here in the woods is the abundance of wildlife. We're about 8 parcels or properties away from nothing but the Cascade Wilderness, so we get a lot of wildlife wandering through. So far we've seen tons of deer. In fact, we have at least a couple deer and deer families that live on the property and are here almost every day, for better or for worse. We've seen quite a few bears in person. We've seen raccoons, owls, lots of eagles and hawks and other birds, some herons nest nearby. We've got possums and coyotes that we've seen in person. On a couple of cameras we have on the property, we've caught photos of a cougar and a bobcat. My wife has also seen a cougar in person crossing the road when she was outside on the farm. So just an abundance of wildlife. And one of my favorite stories about wildlife, I was at work when I got a call from my wife, and she was so excited. She'd just been happening to look out the window of our house, which is right here on the farm, when 3 otters popped out of our pond, 3 river otters. And so she grabbed her phone and she ran out the door and down our little farm road to the gate that you saw earlier, the farm entrance. And she was able to snap a photo of the river otters as they ran under the gate and across the road and on to wherever they disappeared to. But she called and she was so excited to have seen river otters roaming the property, and sent me photos right away. It was really a blast, and I'm pretty jealous that I didn't get to see them myself. So as we walk down the aisle here, you'll notice that I was able to cut some of the grass before it got a little bit too wet to finish the mowing. So we've got a nice aisle here, but these bushes are in long rows, and what we hope to experiment with the back field here is actually filling in these rows a little bit tighter, planting a bush between each of these, the existing bushes in the long rows here, and so that we have sort of a denser hedge of blueberries that folks can pick along as they walk down these aisles. And we'll fill in what is at the base of these blueberries, at the feet of these blueberries, with some wood byproduct, and probably aged sawdust is what we'll use. That tends to be what a lot of blueberry farmers use for their mulch. Now as we're stepping out here back towards the front fields, you're going to be witnessing the carnage that was a project we started a couple weeks ago, and then it got wet and we didn't finish the cleanup. So we will do that when it dries out a little bit and I can get my tractor back down here without sinking it. So what we did is cut down a handful of alders, maybe a little bit more than a handful, 10 alders or so, 12. All of them were maybe 4 inches or less in diameter. And got those cut down. We got about half of the stumps removed using our little tractor backhoe. My brother-in-law and sister's boyfriend were working on that for us, so they got these stubs dug out for us, which was a lot of fun. And as you saw, the holes that they left filled up with water with that heavy rain that we had. So we'll get these all pushed back in here at some point. Got to dispose of the stumps. I got to do a little cleanup on some of these smaller trees that we still have left here. We'll get those cleaned up. We cleared these because they were at the edge of our forest. About half of our property is in forestry, and it's a little over 5 acres, and they're mostly evergreens. There's maybe some big leaf maple in there. But these alders and other deciduous trees are growing up at the edges, which is fine. You can see some alders there on the other side of the grass field from us here. And those are fine, but what we'd like to see is just how much space we have to grow here, what the conditions are around that, because we'd really like to explore what more we can grow. And speaking of that, so this area back here, we have almost another acre that we could grow back here that on the other side of that brush pile is brush that needs to be cut back and sort of see what we have there. May not grow blueberries there, may explore an orchard or maybe something that does well in a little bit shadier area. So we're trying to figure out exactly how much sun that area gets, how wet it is, what the soil's like, and going through all those processes right now, actually. That was another one of the projects a couple weeks ago. So we have some ideas for this area, including possibly some lavender and some rose here. Again, we need to sort of clear out this area and really understand what is there, what the topography is like, how wet does it get, how does it drain. So it'll be one of those projects that we do over time as we get things cleaned up. Well, thanks for joining me on a walk around our blueberry fields today on this beautiful November day. I hope you enjoyed seeing the colors of our blueberry bushes, learning a little bit about how we're farming, what we hope to do, a little bit about the history of farm. We'll keep you updated about what's going on here at Blueberry Glen. So please like and subscribe so that others can find the channel and that you can continue to hear what's going on here at the farm. Thanks so much and take care.